Hello, hello. Welcome to This Week in People. I'm your host, Lars Schmidt, and as always, This Week in People is supported by my friends at PIN, the internal communications platform for the distributed workforce. Now, as every episode, all of the articles I'm about to walk you through are listed below the video in the show notes, so definitely encourage you to dig into those and go a bit deeper. I'm going to give you an overview of them now. Let's pick up actually where we left off last week. Last week we shared a epic report by George LaRocque on the amount of venture capital that's being poured into the HR tech ecosystem. And this piece by Crunchbase goes a little bit deeper with some more analysis on the field, the traction, different sectors that are getting funding, etc. So if you're thinking about starting a company in HR tech, now is probably a pretty good time. So moving on, this is a great piece by Axios, a rare inside look at some of the ERGs within Twitter. So I'll share the link. It'll go into some specific details on how they operate, how they were created, and how they run, and the impact that they work to have. So it's always nice when you get an inside look at how some of the organizations approach ERGs, and this piece will give you a little bit of that insight into Twitter. You know, there's also this really good McKinsey report in the past week that broke down a range of kind of employee sentiments around hybrid work and returning to the workplace. Things from really the key takeaways, and they kind of represent this in the next several charts, is around clarity and communication. I think most employees feel that they are not getting as much clarity and communication around what the organization's post-pandemic plans are. And we talked about that a little bit last week's one of the articles last week's around recruiting as well, how companies are really struggling with recruiting who don't have a clear vision for what their work landscape will be like beyond the pandemic. And so without that clarity, you're kind of asking employees to commit to something that may change, and they may not have a clear line of sight on what that's going to be. So this report gets into some more considerations, and again, just some additional data for all of you that are going through these exercises with the organizations now. So definitely check that one out. There's another good HBR piece this week on why we shouldn't be thinking about banning politics at work. And you know, obviously this is a hot button topic for business in general, but also specifically HR. We've seen from commentaries from Basecamp to Coinbase and a range of others, the idea of how you kind of tackle political conversations and discourse within the workplace is complicated. And so this piece is a thoughtful piece I found on kind of looking at some of the ways that you might want to think about encouraging spaces where people can show up and have conversations that represent who they are, without necessarily having everything be completely political in orientation. So it's a good balanced article. I think it's worth your time to take a read, and this is probably one that you might want to have bookmarked as you get into these conversations with your executive teams, because if you haven't yet, I'm sure you will at some point. So this was a really interesting report from the Academy to Innovate HR on data fluency in HR. And they have some interesting metrics, charts, and resources around how HR practitioners should be thinking about the level of data fluency that they should possess in their role. And it's a very complicated field. Unless you're a dedicated people analytics specialist, the depth of your knowledge is only going to go so far. And so, it's always, we talk about how it's so important to be data informed, data led, however you want to frame things, really having an understanding of what are the core kind of fundamentals of not even necessarily people analytics, but just how you should be gathering and capturing and distilling data to extract insights from that to help inform your people strategy. And so this piece is a great primer, I think, on just how you should be approaching this as a practitioner. The last thing I want to share with you is something that I'm so excited to get into your hands today. It is the new Redefining HR open source learning lab. This is something that I've literally been thinking about and wanting to build for over 2 years. I've had this roll through shows like this and newsletters and other platforms where I've been curating content for years, and I've been organizing it and categorizing it, and I've been wanting to find a way to kind of aggregate it all, which I had done, but then be able to share that in a usable way for HR practitioners and my community and my network and those that the resources may help. So I've tried a lot of different tools. I explored with a lot of different things, and ultimately I went with a platform that I'm a huge fan of, Coda. So you may have seen some of the coronavirus or return to workplace or different open source projects that I've launched in Coda over the last probably 18 months. So if you've seen those, you're somewhat familiar with the functionality, but Coda will be the home for the Redefining HR open source learning lab. So there's at launch today, there are over 260 resources that I've curated. They're all organized and categorized. So the way you can go through this, again, the link to this platform is in the show notes. All of the content is organized by category. And for V1, which I'm launching today, within each category, I broke things down into articles, reports and benchmarking, and tools and resources. And as the library expands, I'll probably get a bit more granular with some of those subcategories. But it's an easy way for you to kind of get in and assess what you need and hopefully find resources that can inspire you. And it's not just resources. I've curated podcasts, newsletters, books, communities. So again, this is literally something that I've been working on for almost 2 years now. So this is kind of the motherload of all of the resources I've been curating, and this is the thing that I will continue to curate. So rather than kind of building these one-off open source projects, everything will live in this from here on out. And so that way I can ensure that I can keep it fresh with current content. I'll be adding new resources every single week. So there'll be more stuff to come and build this out. You can get into a category like Return to Workplace, and in the category view, you'll see all of the resources. Here's a screenshot here of what that'll look like, that you can browse through, and then you can also segment those by those categories that I just mentioned. And this being open source, this gets better with you, with your help. So there is a section here where any visitor to the platform can suggest a tool, a resource, an article, a white paper, podcast, whatever it might be. This will be a community-driven platform. So I've created it, I'm going to curate it, I'm going to own it, but it's going to get better with all of your data inputs. So I'm excited to hear what you think your peers and contemporaries should be reading, watching, listening to, etc. So this is V1. I'm going to be tweaking this as time goes on. In time, I'm going to add a search functionality to it and get more granular with some of the feedback on the resources, and even get into some other multimedia platforms like dedicated sections for video content as well. So what do you think? I'm all ears. Like I said, this is an open source platform, so I'll be iterating and evolving this with your support. But I really hope you find it helpful and useful and valuable in supporting your work as a modern practitioner. And I'm thrilled to get this out into your hands. So really excited to see how you leverage this. And like I said, I hope you find it useful. So that's a wrap for this week's show. We'll be back next week with more news and updates. In the meantime, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you next week.